We've made it to another week 9 on the Phil Steele Show. Kyle Schass primed and ready for another Herculean effort from our man Phil Steele. Of course, the lock doctor himself, Tripp Hurd, is with us. I'm at Kyle Schass at PhilSteele042 and online at PhilSteele.com. At Locks of the Dock for Tripp Hurd. And we entered the week with 10 unbeatens, but now we only have 9. Liberty falling to Kennesaw State on a Wednesday night. Shouts to the Owls. Became the first 0-5 team or worse in 23 seasons to defeat a team 5-0 or better. In Liberty, the Flames fall from the ranks of the unbeatens. 27-point favorites, mind you. 9 unbeatens now remain. Kent State, the only winless FBS team. We'll get to the flashes. Appreciate all the listeners, all the viewers. Got another big week for us in week 8 on YouTube on the Varsity Network channel. Make sure you subscribe. All the OG College Sports Now listeners, appreciate you as well. And if you listened last week and you followed Phil and I, we made you a lot of money. We might have paid for Christmas. We went a combined 7-1. Phil was 3-0. I gave you 5 picks. I was feeling myself. Started 4-0. It was only TCU winning outright over Utah that kept me from a 5-0 week. And Tripp's over here just giving you overs between Rutgers and UCLA that missed by nearly 20 points. They scored almost 70 combined points, Tripp.
I gave you the under. And
you give the under.
70. It went over, and I think like the first 12 seconds. So not a good pick. We're going to do better this week.
Yeah, I hope so. Phil is going to provide some wisdom for you for sure. Phil, what did you think of that game last night, though, with Kennesaw and Liberty?
Pretty shocking. I know Liberty's been playing down to the level of their opponent all season long, but they really had to play down to get to Kennesaw State's level. And you got to give it to Kennesaw State. Great home crowd supporting them despite being 0-6, and to the players for playing the entire game. So hats off to Kennesaw State. Great win last night. Big upset, though. I did not see that one coming.
Well, we have 5 ranked-on-ranked matchups. Someone's bound to go down that we don't expect, even as we move past Liberty and Kennesaw State. So much football to get to. We'll go through 30-plus games, and Tripp will take us first Thursday night to Norfolk.
Yeah, let's talk Georgia Southern on the road at Old Dominion tonight. Monarchs are laying 1 point at home. They're coming off back-to-back wins. Georgia Southern also won last week against JMU, 28-14. They did that as a 10-point dog. This is also the time of the year we start talking about bowl eligibility. Eagles are a game short coming into this one, so you know they want it. They're 5-2 overall. Been really good against the spread, 5-1-1 on the season. I noticed some of their statistical numbers don't look so great. They're 107 against the run, even worse statistically against the pass. But if you look at their schedule, they played some good teams. They played Ole Miss. You know they're going to give up some points to Ole Miss a few weeks back. And they gave up just under 400 yards on the ground in week 1 to Boise. And that was Ashton Genty. We all know that's not so bad of a loss anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You go back to that James Madison game, or the Boise State game, I should say. Georgia Southern actually led that thing in the fourth quarter and ended up coming up short. And then last week, they took on a powerful James Madison. And at the half, they led 21-0 and had a 245 to 81-yard edge. I like the way J.C. French is throwing the ball. Jalen White and Arnold are a dynamic combination of running back. And this is an underrated Georgia Southern team. Now, I'm always hesitant to go against Ricky Ronnie as a dog, or pretty much any time. This guy always gets the most out of his team. And I like what Colton Joseph has been given the offense the last couple of weeks. Dynamic runner as well as passer. But I do think Georgia Southern's a better team and capable of going on the road and getting the win. And if you could dominate James Madison like that, I think they're capable of handling the road win. So I'm going to lean with Georgia Southern here.
That's a 7 o'clock start on ESPN2, 5 o'clock on the Georgia Southern Sports Network from Learfield. I got the Hay in the Barn, one of the networks that I manage. Studio 33, ready to rip with Danny Reed and company at 5 o'clock from Norfolk. Syracuse at Pitt. The Panthers are laying 6, 62 is the total, 7:30 on ESPN. Pitt 6-0 for the first time since 1982. Pitt quarterback Eli Holstein, first Panthers quarterback to win his first 6 career starts since Dan Marino did it across a stretch of 2 different seasons. Panthers have won 18 of the past 22 against the Orange, but lost 28-13 in Yankee Stadium last year. Syracuse seeking a 4th straight win. Only loss was by 2 at home to Stanford week 4. Kyle McCord, Phil, just continuing to dazzle. 2nd nationally in passing yards per game. 1st with nearly 31 completions per contest.
Yeah, and this one, I like both quarterbacks. I like both offenses. I'm leaning towards the over, I think, is your best play in this one. When you look at Pitt, they seem to get better every week. Remember, they needed to come back against Cincinnati, they come back against West Virginia, starting to play really good ball. Although California missed a field goal at the end of the game that could have beat them. But Desmond Reed's dynamic at running back, not only running the football, but he's also their number 2 receiver, and Holstein's been great. And as you mentioned, Kyle McCord having a great year. They got LaQuinn Allen at running back. And some plenty of talent at the receiver position. Arandi Gatson is back after missing last year. They got Pena and Meeks. So you've got 2 really potent offenses. You got 2 decent. I mean, Pitt's got the edge defensively. They're holding the opponents 22 yards per game below their average. Syracuse has played a soft schedule, and they are allowing opponents 10 yards above their season average. So I think Pitt gets a win at home, but over to me is the best play here.
I've got another over for you here that I like on Friday night. Louisville at Boston College. Cards are favored by 7.5, and the total is sitting at 53.5. I think it's another good quarterback matchup with Shuck and Castellanos. Louisville, almost took down Miami last week. That game had to go right down to the wire. They could have won that game. Boston College struggled at Virginia Tech. They had a lot of turnovers in that game. Both these teams are 3-4 against the spread, but both started 3-0. So they're both on 4-game non-cover streaks right now. But for this series, the over has been a good bet. Going back to 2014, it's gone over 8 out of the last 10 times they've met. I think these offenses are going to put up some points here on Friday night. And for me, it's the over. What do you like in this one, Phil?
Yeah, I could definitely see the over. I think Castellanos is an exciting quarterback. You go back to last week, Boston College looked dead in the water at half. They were down 28-0. They gave Virginia Tech 332 yards in the first half. Then all of a sudden, BC comes back to a 28-21 game and has the ball, and then gave up a couple of late scores. So that was really a game of ebbs and flows. But on the season, they are allowing opponents 8 yards above their season average. And as you mentioned, though, BC's got Castellanos, a quarterback, 14-4 ratio. They've got some weapons. And Louisville's got weapons as well. And Tyler Shuck has an 18-3 ratio this year. And they are actually putting up 100 yards above what opponents come in averaging. So Louisville does look like an over team. BC looks like an over team. I've been going against Louisville each week over the last 4 weeks and been rewarded. As you mentioned, they're on a 4-game losing spread streak. So I'm going to side with BC plus the points at home. And I can anoint your overplay there, Tripp.
All right, good. That makes me feel a little better. Another great game Friday night. Could be game of the year in a group of 5, what? UNLV and Boise State. What's the problem?
No, you're right. Just hearing that, though, about group of 5, I get your satire. It's a real thing. I mean, there's going to be fireworks.
Oh, it's going to be a great, Boise State on the road at UNLV. Boise they're laying 3.5. The total is up there on this one, too, 65.5. I think Boise's been a little more on the radar this year just because of Ginty. Rightly so. He's been phenomenal. They've gotten good quarterback play, too, though, here lately. UNLV, 19th against the run, but they haven't seen anything like Ashton Ginty this year. I like their quarterback, Haj Malik Williams. I do think they'll move the ball. I think this is another game that could go over here. A really fun one to watch. I do lean with Boise as well, laying the 3.5, but I saw 2.5 earlier in the week. If it keeps creeping up, I'm not sure how far I'm willing to play this one. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points there, Tripp. And, when you look at Boise, the thing I go back and keep being stunned at is the Oregon game. I mean, they played Oregon within 3 points. And if you watch that game, probably could easily have won. Led in the fourth quarter, end up losing the game by 3. And that was in Autzen Stadium against the number 1 team in the country. So they proved their worth. If that's their lone loss at the year, Boise ends up being the team in the playoff this year, and they've played like they deserve to be. In fact, in my average game grades, they're playing to 113.3 level at top of the group of 5 teams. Now, UNLV has a tough offense to prepare against. They run a lot of different things against you. Williams, what he's done, and the thing I like about their offensive coordinator is how he's adapted. Sluka was more of a running quarterback. He was completing 44%, but he was a dangerous runner. Now, Williams also can run the ball, but he's hitting 71% with a 10-2 ratio. That makes him dangerous. I think defensively, got got to give the edge to Boise, holding opponents to 20 yards per game below their season average. And then we're going to go back to last year's game. These two met for a crucial game. It was the Mountain West Championship game, and Boise came in here to UNLV and won it 44-20. So Boise's proven they can win here. I think they're the better team. I'm going to take Boise minus the points.
Yeah, just a monster showdown. The thing with me is, who would have thunk it? Who would have had this one circled prior to the start of the regular season? Boise State at UNLV, 10:30, CBS Sports Network. It's what makes this sport so great. I'm just happy we have two late games because I'm going to see some comedian called Louis Black in Durham. I never heard of him, but I got tickets. I'm going to see him. Apparently, he's been around a while. So I just hope I'm home by at least 11 and don't miss much of that one. And I'll be there for the start of Rutgers and USC, 11 o'clock on Fox. Trojans are laying 14. 56.5 is the total. First meeting, Lincoln Riley is 5-9 now in his last 14 games. As your magazine indicates, Phil, the college football preview, the Bible for any college football fan. This will be the Trojans' third game sandwiched between two true road games this year. Now, USC went 0-3 ATS in that scenario last season, but they've covered in each of those previous two examples this year. Late cover for me with the over. When Maryland won in the final minute, Billy Edwards ran it in from 3 yards out. 53 ticks remaining, erased a 14-point deficit. Trojans were stunned again. Rutgers, though, has dropped 3 in a row. What's your feel for this one? Scarlet Knights visiting SC.
I think Schiano will get Rutgers turned around. I think you're going to have a good finish to the season, a nice bowl come out of it, even though they've dropped their last 3. But the thing when I look at Rutgers right now is they've got a lot of injuries on that defensive front 7, and it's shown in the games. They're allowing some big-time yards and points. In fact, the last 2 games, they've given their opponent close to 200 yards above their season average. So I'm concerned with the health of Rutgers defense. And then when you look at USC, is this the best 3 and 4 team in the country? Take a look. Go to philsteele.com and check out my Vegas power ratings. I believe, I know they're in the top 20. I'm not sure where they are. I think they're number 15 in Vegas right now. Because if you look at USC's losses, they lost to Michigan, a game that could easily won on the road in Ann Arbor. Mullins got that late run and then the fourth down at the goal line for the touchdown to win, or else they beat Michigan. Minnesota, they've got the lead by a touchdown. They fumble. Penn State, they led the entire game, led by 14 at the half, lose it 2 overtimes. And then last week, they're kicking the game-clinching field goal. So USC beats Maryland. They've been up the entire game. It's blocked. Maryland gets the miracle touchdown and beats them. USC could easily be 7-0 right now. I think this is the week you see these players take advantage of it. I love the skill players with Marks and Joyner at running back. Miller Moss should have a big game against this banged-up defense. And same thing with their receiving core. So I like USC minus the points here.
USC is 15th, according to your Week 9 Vegas power rankings.
Thank you.
Just got the PDF, got the download up, so I can reference it at any point. Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Oregon, and Alabama. Those are your top 5. Ole Miss at 6. Tennessee, Clemson, Penn State, Miami round out that top 10. Notre Dame is number 12. They're taking on Navy at MetLife. This is a game, as a Notre Dame stan that I am, the homer and Golden Domer that your boy is very excited to have a start-to-finish viewing experience Saturday at noon because I work later in the night. I'm going to be co-hosting or hosting following Stephen Hartzell on the College Football Blitz. So I'll be holding it down in the evening on the Varsity Network app and Sirius XM. So I work 6 to midnight. So I've got 12 o'clock teed up for Notre Dame and Navy. It's the 97th meeting all time. I don't know what kind of viewing experience this is going to be because I'm worried, Phil, okay? The Middies are getting 13, 51.5 is the total. It's an ABC game. It was 42-3 last year in Ireland. This is a different team under second-year head coach Brian Newberry. Irish have a bye next week before Florida State comes to South Bend. Then they close with Virginia at home against undefeated Army at Yankee Stadium, and then at Southern Cal. The over has hit in 12 of the past 18, though. I will note it's sitting at 51.5.
Yeah, and in this one, I like the Irish for numerous reasons. First of all, you just take a look at the talent on the field. Notre Dame's got NFL caliber guys, and Navy does not. So that's an advantage to Notre Dame. But I like the situation. The fact that they play both Navy and Army this year means that there was a lot of work against the option in the preseason, probably in spring, in August. And we've seen that Freeman can defend the option. You go back to 2 years ago. Now, that was a strange game in Baltimore. They led 35-13 at the half. They were in complete control. and then they just fell asleep in the second half and let them back in the game. I think that helps Notre Dame minus the points here because Freeman can point to that and say, hey, you almost let Navy beat us the last time we played a neutral site game by letting them back in the game. No let up here. I like that. The fact that last year they beat them 42-3. Now, Drew Cronick has brought in a different offense for Navy. It's not just pure option. I mean, they'll drop back in the shotgun and run spread. They run wing T. They run a lot of different offenses. But I still think Freeman is a good enough defensive mind to defense it. They've got the players. And the last time Notre Dame played a Navy team that was ranked was, let me get the exact year here. Notre Dame and
this is the number that I normally have, Phil. Shame on me for not having this stat nugget.
Yeah, the last time they played a Navy team that was ranked was 2019, and Notre Dame won that game 52-20. So it's the only time that Navy has been ranked in the time that they've been playing Notre Dame. And I think you'll see Notre Dame come to this one ready to play.
I hope so.
Let's talk Indiana. Perfect 7-0 on the season, but they're going to be without their quarterback this week, Curtis Rourke, as the Hoosiers play host to Washington in Bloomington. Rourke had surgery on his thumb. I'm actually reading they think he may only miss one game, maybe 2 games, so they could get him back quick, but he's out this week. With him in the lineup, they've been a top 5 offense in college football. So it's going to be interesting to see this week as they take on Washington, a defense that only allows a little 123 yards per game passing. That's best in college football. Washington's a good team statistically. Their numbers statistically don't really match their overall record, but I think the under could be in play here with a backup quarterback for Indiana. It's at 53. Any interest in any side of this game here, Phil?
Not the total, but I do like Indiana, even with the backup quarterback. And let me tell you a little bit about Tav Jackson. He's a VHT, originally signed at Tennessee, played here at Indiana last year, actually started 5 games, had a couple of really good games, had some off games, but he didn't have the surrounding talent that he's got here. He is a little more mobile quarterback, maybe not quite as accurate as Curtis Rourke. Rourke has had a fantastic season. This guy has been automatic on third down, which I think has been huge to Indiana's success. I don't know if Tav Jackson's going to be able to do that, but he does add mobility, and they've got the run game. They've got a 4-headed monster at running back with Ellison, Lawton, Black, and Green. I like that. I like Indiana's defense. Now, I agree with you. Washington's better than their record. You go back to the season, they're holding opponents to 106 yards per game below their season average. That's number 12 in the country, allowing just 266 yards per game. They have a really good defense. Indiana gave up some big pass plays against Northwestern and Maryland, and Will Rogers is hitting 72% with a 13-2 ratio. So I can see some matchup edges here. Keep in mind, the last time Curt Cignetti had game day on hand, he was at James Madison last year, and all they talked about was James Madison, James Madison, James Madison. And guess what? App State beat them. All the talk here is Indiana, Indiana, Indiana. But I like the fact that he had that experience. He's got players from James Madison. He can say, look, ignore all the noise that's out there. Ignore the game day. Let's just focus on the game. And how do you go against Indiana that just continues to win and cover each week? Spreads under a touchdown. I like Tav Jackson. In fact, in August, Tav Jackson and Curtis Rourke were dead even as far as the job. Rourke barely beat him out. I'm going to take Indiana minus the points there.
Sig Nasty, Curt Cignetti, likes to say, Google me. Well, I just Googled Tav Jackson, and you're right, Phil. But at the very bottom of that bio, by the way, some insane flow. I hope we see that curling out from underneath the lid on Saturday against Washington. His dad, Ray, played in the NFL, also played in NFL Europe, and he played for Washington State. He was a cornerback, Ray Jackson, member of the Cougars 98 Pac-10 champion and Rose Bowl team. So how about that? You got some football lineage there. Tav Jackson, no slouch for sure. Look forward to seeing him against the Huskies on Saturday.
Nice.
Good
little nugget there.
Way to pick it up, Kyle. You are doing a great job, by the way.
I got you. Thank you, Phil.
That would have been a Ryan Leaf team, right?
98?
The Cougs?
I think
Sounds
so.
about right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump to the SEC. Noon kick for number 18 Ole Miss in the Grove.
Can I go ahead and just tell you a quick story about that 1998 team?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Story time with Phil. That's what I was hoping for, Phil.
I wish we had some music to cue
in 1998, they got to the Rose Bowl, right? And then in 1999, I actually picked Washington State last in the Pac-12. And I got invited to go on a Washington radio show that year in 1999. And this was early in the magazine, so it was all very important to me. Now I do hundreds of shows every year, but back then I was doing maybe 50 shows. Anyway, they invite me on and they go, okay, we got Phil Steele on, and your Washington State Cougars, Rose Bowl champions. Phil Steele has picked them last in the Pac-12. Now let's open up the phones. And I just got beat up for a full half hour on the air. By the way, Washington State did finish last in the Pac-12 that year, 1999, but it was a rough half hour for me.
I love it.
Awesome.
Hey, the training wheels were still on at that point. So,
That's right.
It was hardening you. You were becoming callous, the earliest stages of Phil Steele in his media career, for sure. I love that.
All right. Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Number 18 Ole Miss at home in the Grove. Got Oklahoma in town. The Rebs are laying 20 at home in this one. They'll be off a bye after dropping 2 of their last 3, but the way things are going, SEC is still wide open, so we're going to see a very motivated Ole Miss team here. You don't normally think of Oklahoma as a get-right game, but here we are this season. The Sooners, they fired their offensive coordinator. Joe John Finley is going to be handling play calling. OU's also turning back to Jackson Arnold at quarterback. I think it's a really tough spot for the Sooners here. Rebels only give up 10 points a game, very stout up front against the run this season, but it's just weird to see Oklahoma getting that many points. Hard to feel good about that, right?
Yeah, I would actually lean with taking Oklahoma plus the points in this. I do think when you look at Ole Miss and you look at the rest of their schedule, if they were to get past Georgia, beat Georgia at home, they're locked into the playoff. They'd be 10-2 at the end of the year with the win over Georgia. They'll get there. Meanwhile, Oklahoma, yeah, they've really, their new offensive coordinator going back to Jackson Arnold. Their offense has been putrid. I mean, 266 yards per game the last 4 weeks. Meanwhile, Ole Miss is holding opponents to 72 yards per game, below their season average. They did somehow beat Auburn on the road, and I think that it's when you do a coaching change, sometimes that's a big help. I'm going to say Oklahoma somehow hangs with Ole Miss. Numbers say Ole Miss should win this by 24, 28 points, but I think Oklahoma comes to play. I'll take the Sooners plus the points there.
Well, Brent Venables' seat is really starting to warm, too. I mean, he's got to be able to inspire his club somehow, and we'll see if the spirit of Jackson Arnold has not yet been broken and how he can perform on the road in front of the Grove at 18th ranked Ole Miss, 12 o'clock on ESPN. 129th edition of the South's oldest rivalry, tied for the second most played rivalry in all of the FBS. I'm talking about Virginia and North Carolina, tied with Georgia and Auburn, behind Wisconsin, Minnesota, who have met 133 times. Tar Heels are catching 4 on the road, 59.5 is the total, 12 o'clock on the CW. The Heels have won 5 of 7 straight up in Charlottesville, as your magazine reminded me, Phil. By the way, philsteele.com for more information. Phil Steele plus info there as well, $99 value. Phil might take us behind the curtain here and share his screen throughout the remainder of the program, show you all of the beautiful additives and pleasantries that Phil Steele Plus will provide. But the Hoos have covered the last 3, okay, overall, and won 5 of the last 7. UNC has lost 4 straight off a bye. Virginia lost 48-21 at Clemson. What do you think of the Cavaliers, who just lost their basketball coach inside of 3 weeks to the start of the college basketball season? I know Phil gives 0 cares about that, but do you think the Hoos can cover at home the 4 against Carolina?
You know, I'm actually going to lean a little bit with North Carolina. I go back to a couple weeks ago against Pitt. I thought after blowing that 20-0 to lead against Duke, that North Carolina would just mail it in the rest of the year. They gave Pitt a good game. And then Georgia Tech, they lose by 7, but that's a game where they were down 3 points, down 3, first and goal at the 3-yard line. They score a touchdown. They're winning by 4. They end up kicking a field goal to tie it, and then a simple run play up the middle turns into a touchdown for Georgia Tech. Tough loss for North Carolina at home, but they still have hopes of getting to a bowl. They still have Mac Brown there. I like the way Criswell is playing. He's got an 8-3 ratio this year. And, of course, they've got one of the best running backs in the country in Amari Hampton, who's being overshadowed by North Carolina's 3-4 record. But if you watch this guy play this year, he has been dynamic the entire season. Virginia's now in a rare role of being favored in a game. They've been a pretty much a pure underdog under Elliott and all the games. He's got a great record in the ACC, but the majority of that's come as an underdog. Now he's favored. I'm going to take North Carolina plus the points in a potential upset.
Let's jump to the AAC. Tulane, an 8-point favorite on the road at North Texas this week. Green Wave let me down last week. I had them covering a big number against Rice. That was a ball game all the way into the fourth quarter. They finally pulled away with a couple of late touchdowns. North Texas coming off a wild game against Memphis. That one went down to the wire. They lost 52-44. North Texas has been a great over team this year. 6-1 on overs. They're going to need to be to hit this one. It's 67.5. Pretty high total there. What's your angle on this game, Phil?
Yeah, I think the over is probably a decent play. North Texas has moved the ball on everybody. They're averaging 147 yards above what opponents average. Now, I'll take you back to that Tulsa game, which was 3 weeks ago. First 4 drives of the game, North Texas went nowhere. I mean, nowhere. I think if they had one first down, I don't know. It might have had 0 first downs after 4 drives. They finished that game with 618 yards and 52 points, which is amazing. So this offense can light it up. Even when they get off to a slow start, they're going to light it up in the game. So I like the over because their defense is giving up 108 yards above the opponent's average. And Tulane's got a dynamic run game. You look at Malik Hughes and Mensa, their quarterback, very smart. When you look at Tulane's quarterback, Mensa's hitting 11-2 ratio this year. Tulane does have a massive edge on defense, but their offense is not quite as good as North Texas. So I lean with the over. I'd also lean with North Texas at home getting these points, and they have backdoor potential.
Yeah, that was a weird final against Rice, though. Tulane had scored 40-plus points in 3 straight games. Were well on their way, you thought, to a 4th against Rice. They had scored 40 and 4-plus games back in 98, so they nearly matched that streak. But, yeah, this is a tough one, though. North Texas, Memphis, what a game that was a week ago. Total has gone over in 4 straight home games for Mississippi State. They host Arkansas, 12:45 SEC Network. Hogs are laying 6.5 as road favorites. 58 is the total. Bulldogs have won 9 of 12 straight up while holding the total yards edge in 11 of those meetings. Hogs fell by a whopping score of 7-3 a year ago, just 10 combined points in Fayetteville. That's where Pittman got popped as a home dog last week against LSU in a big way. What do you think here with the Hogs, Pittman, favorites on the road? Can they bounce back after the deflating defeat to LSU at home a week ago against Mississippi State team that's looked somewhat competent at times? Again, they only lost by 10 to Georgia.
Yeah, and you go back to last year's game, it was just pure ugly. KJ Jefferson was struggling the whole game. He was far from 100. He's like 50% for the game and hobbling around. And Mississippi State's touchdown came on a 32-yard drive after a turnover, and that was the lone touchdown in the game. So it was ugly, ugly, ugly. Now, I think Arkansas is playing with legitimate revenge. If you look at Mississippi State, the difference in their team has been since Michael Van Buren took over at QB. He got a 6-2 ratio. He's been putting up a lot of points on the board. But here's the thing. Their last 3 games, they were massive underdogs to Texas in a letdown spot, massive underdog to Georgia. Georgia had a look-ahead game, massive underdog to Texas A&M. They did give A&M quite a game. They were down 7 points, had the ball. So I will say they played A&M tough. But this is the first team that's going to come in and take them serious, much like Florida did 4 weeks ago. And I think Arkansas is a really good team. Arkansas really let me down last week against LSU. It was a surprising performance for me. Pittman always plays well against ranked teams. Pittman's always great as a dog. They beat Tennessee. They outgained Texas A&M by 100 yards. So this is a really good Arkansas team that also should have beaten Oklahoma State earlier in the year. They should have led that thing 28-0 at the half. They had a touchdown pass called back and then threw a 78-yard interception return for a touchdown. It was only 21-7 at the half. So I think Arkansas takes Mississippi State seriously, needs this win. And if you take Mississippi State seriously, I think there's a talent edge here. I like Arkansas minus the points to get revenge for last year's loss.
Woo pig suey.
Love it.
1 o'clock start time for Georgia State on the mountain at App State. Mountaineers favored by 7.5. Both of these teams on 3-game losing streaks coming into this one. App is a perfect 10-0 in the last 10 against the Panthers going back to 2014, but they've only covered in 2 of those meetings. What's your play here, Phil?
I think we're going to see a different App State team than we've seen this year. Now, do keep in mind, they played a pretty tough schedule. They lost at Clemson. They got that comeback win at East Carolina, which is never an easy place to play. The South Alabama game still scratching my head a bit. That was really surprising. They only put up 14 points, but they played a good game against Marshall, played a good game at Louisiana, and Marshall and Louisiana are two of the top teams in the Sun Belt. Now they finally take a step down. Georgia State's the weakest opponent they've played since the opener when they beat East Tennessee State. They could turn their season around. They're off a bye. They need a win at home. And I like Joey Aguilar. He's got 11-9 ratio this year, but last year he had a 33-10 ratio, and I think he's going to revert to form. I look for the best game of the year for App State this week. Meanwhile, Georgia State, they stepped into a tough situation. Their head coach quits 3 days into spring practice, lost a lot of players to the portal. They've been rebuilding. They open up a Sunbelt play 0-3. They're minus 46 yards per game in Sunbelt play. App, by the way, despite their losing record, plus 35 yards per game. So I think Georgia State's one of the lower teams in the Sunbelt, taking on one of the upper teams that's only lost to upper teams. I like App State to play their best game of the season this week, minus the points.
It'll be an emotional return as well to Kid Brewer Stadium in the aftermath. First game since Hurricane Helene. Mike Houston is out in Greenville. John Gilbert announced Sunday it was one of 2 head coaches getting whacked. Will Hall at Southern Miss, the other. So ECU is turning in an interim role to ECU defensive coordinator Blake Harrell. Houston went 27-38 in his 5+ seasons. They're favorites at home. Dowdy Ficklin laying 7, 49 the total, 2 o'clock on ESPN Plus, hosting Temple. Will there be enough juice here, Phil, to inspire covering that touchdown against the Owls at Dowdy Ficklin?
You got any information why they got rid of Houston at this particular juncture? I mean, I thought he was...
So my understanding,
Yes.
because, I was curious on the timing. I think, so last week it was the Service Academy, right? Wasn't it Army? Army was the game last week. You wanted to do it. My sources tell me you wanted to do it after the Charlotte embarrassment. If there was any time to do it, losing to Biff Poggi and a bad Charlotte team in Charlotte, unacceptable for sure. But Houston, they had a bye in between. He had sent the team home for a few days to start that bye week, and they did not want to do it with the players out of town. They were trying to be respectful, the optics of that. So with the players not in Greenville, they allowed him to do one more week, and it got ugly early. Now, they made it respectable in the end somewhat against Army, but that's what I'm told was the reason behind the timing, because the players had gone home for a few days as part of the bye week.
And I just look overall what he's done for the program. I mean, they were a dumpster fire when he took over, and he's really built them back up. I know last year wasn't a good year, but you look at the rest of the schedule this year: Temple at home, Florida Atlantic home, at Tulsa. They've got wins on the schedule. Could very well make a bowl game. I expect a bowl game. I would have expected a bowl game if Houston was still the head coach. Sort of reminds me of when they let Ruffin McNeil go, and then what happened to East Carolina after McNeil went. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back to this particular matchup. I think East Carolina is the better team. Now, last week I liked Temple to beat Tulsa. They took care of business for me. They are playing decent defense. Something you probably haven't noticed, because Temple comes into this 2-5, but they're holding opponents to 82 yards per game below their season average. Go back to the Oklahoma game in the opener. I know Oklahoma's offense is struggling. Oklahoma needed 2 late scores to get to that 51 points. They had actually played a pretty decent game against them. But East Carolina is the better team. They've got Garcia and Hauser. It'd be interesting to see who the interim head coach goes with at quarterback. I think they're the more talented team. They're at home. They're tough to beat. And maybe we've seen it in many sports, even though I don't watch other sports. You hear about it, but especially in college football, when they fire a head coach, there's a bounce that first week. They usually play a pretty inspired game. So I like East Carolina minus the points to get the win here.
Texas Tech caught their first loss in conference play last week at home to Baylor. They gave up 59 points, lost as a 5-point favorite. This week, they're on the road at TCU, 2:30 kick, and I'm seeing the Horned Frogs favored by 6.5 right now is the line. TCU, kind of a head scratcher. They won at Utah last week, 13-7. After losing at home to Houston the week before. Make it make sense. The Frogs might be the hardest team to get a beat on in all of college football right now. Saddle Trophy on the line, which dates back to the Southwest Conference days. I'm not messing with any TCU games right now, Phil. If you got to play here, I want to hear it, but I'm staying away for now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the Houston game is really the head scratcher of the bunch.
Yes.
I mean, SMU was turnovers. They were -4 in turnovers, and that really SMU, I think, got 3 defensive special teams touchdowns. The UCF game, they blew a big lead. They led that thing by 21 points, ended up losing by 1. But Houston, they were outplayed by Houston at home, and that was Houston's best game of the year. And then they go on the road and beat Utah. So I think TCU's a better team. Josh Hoover, a quarterback's got a 16-6 ratio. They got some momentum last week by beating Utah, and now they're back at home. And Texas Tech has been sort of iffy, especially on the road. They're giving up a lot of yards and points. Washington State beat them handily. Baylor last week. So I'm going to lean with TCU minus the points, but I agree with you 100%, Tripp. Wouldn't be one of my top 10 plays.
Oregon 21.5-point favorites as we move to the afternoon on CBS at 3:30. 54.5 is the total against 20th ranked Illinois. Ducks ranked number 1 nationally for the first time since 2012. Illinois captured the game they all had highlighted all offseason in those sick Red Grange inspired uniforms and helmets from 100 years ago. I mean, those, you want one of those in your office, right? I heard you tell Hartzell and Cook earlier this week.
And those things looked real, didn't they? What a tremendous job on the job painting those helmets. Those are I always complain when teams have different uniforms, because when you're watching 12 games, your eyes and mind have to adjust to a completely different uniform you're not used to seeing, you don't know. I love those uniforms completely. That was really remarkable, and they looked like leather helmets. But I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, they were sensational. 21-7, that final over the Maize and Blue. Oregon handled their business in Boiler Country, winning 35-zip. Ducks have won 2 of the 3 previous meetings, Phil, including a 34-31 victory the last time these two met in Eugene in 1995.
Yeah, and with Oregon, I thought last week they'd suffer a letdown at Purdue, and there was no such letdown. Led 21-0 at the half, and for the first time this year, they actually played into the fourth quarter. You go back to the UCLA game, they could have been up more, and they ended up giving up the cover. Michigan State, they led 31-0, gave up 10 late points, including a field goal that cost the cover there. But last week they put up 2 fourth quarter touchdowns, so I like that out of Oregon. They're getting better by the week. I don't know if they're going to look ahead necessarily to Michigan next week. I think that Illinois is going to be your tougher opponent. They're at home. And here's the thing that I got to go against Illinois on. Brett Bielema said, and they said it numerous times during the telecast, he said it all week long, you don't beat Michigan preparing 7 days a week for them. You prepare 365 days for Michigan. Well, that means that was a really important game. And it was, because if you know anything about Illinois over the summer, the one game they talked about was this one. They requested Michigan for the opponent for their 100th anniversary game at home. They got them. They played their A game, fake punt for a big first down to set up a touchdown, and won it 21-7. Now they fly across time zones, play a really good Oregon team. And Illinois may not be quite as good as the 6-1 record. They're only plus 21 yards per game. Oregon is as good as its record. So I think it's a letdown spot for Illinois. I'll take Oregon in Autzen Stadium.
Crimson Tide looking to get back on track after losing to Tennessee in Neyland Stadium last Saturday. They've got Mizzou in town for a 3:30 kick in Bryant-Denny. Bama laying 16.5 at home. Milroe didn't have a great game last week. He threw 2 picks. On the other end, Missouri, they had to rally in the second half last week to beat Auburn. Brady Cook got hurt. He came back in. Their leading rusher, Nate Noel, he had to leave with a foot injury. I could see Bama covering a couple of touchdowns off a loss back at home. I don't hate the over either at 51.5 if the Tigers have all the weapons. They do have a lot of guys on offense that are going to be playing on Sundays. So if we get a clean bill of health, I think that 51.5 is definitely reachable. What's your angle on this game here?
I don't think you're going to get a clean bill of health. I think Cook is doubtful, and Nate Noel's probably out for the game. Now, they do have Marcus Carroll, so I think they're okay at running back. And they, of course, have Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Smokey Cooper at the receiver spot. But Missouri's a product of their record being 6-1, I think, because of the schedule. And when you look at their toughest game of the year so far was Texas A&M, and they lost that thing 41-10. They should have lost to Auburn. Granted, Cook did miss a good portion of the game, but he's probably going to miss this one as well. You're talking about an angry Alabama team. And I don't think you're going to see Alabama throw the football 45 times like they did last week against Tennessee. I look for Miller and Haynes and Jalen Milroe himself to run the football and Alabama to have success. It's an Alabama team that needs a feel-good game, and I think they've got the perfect opponent for it. A 6-1 Missouri team that may not be as good as its record. I like Bama to win this one by 3 touchdowns or more.
Vandy folks are using some sensational satire in claiming protective netting will be barricading the Texas visiting section in Nashville after the situation last weekend in a loss against Georgia. Thing is, they'd have to lace the entire perimeter of the field at First Bank Stadium because it's going to be a hell of a lot of Longhorn fans, as it is each and every Vandy home game. The visiting fans take over. Doors are 4-1 in their last 5 against the spread, though. Willing to take Diego Pavia and Clark Lee as a near 19-point underdogs at home against the Horns.
Yeah, and any other year, give me Texas with the home field edge basically at Vanderbilt, coming off a loss, having been a dominant team prior to last week. That means they're ready and set for a blowout against Vanderbilt, which doesn't have a home field edge. But you said it, Diego Pavia. Pavia is just put him as a double-digit dog. And his teams at New Mexico State would pull upsets. They pull upsets here. Vanderbilt comes in with a belief that they can win this game. It makes them, the 2 games they haven't played well. Ball State, Georgia State, big favorites. Here they're backed in the big dog role again. I can't go against Pavia as a big dog. So if you're going to play the game, I'd say bet Vanderbilt, but dangerous situation. Texas is a really good team off a bad loss.
Vandy ranked for the first time since the conclusion of the 2023 season. They check in at number 25 on the polls. One of our 5 ranked on ranked showdowns.
I did not know Vandy was ranked. I didn't pay attention to the AP poll.
Yeah, well, we know you don't. That's the beauty of you, Phil. By the way, you don't watch other sports either. For all of you out there, the World Series starts on Friday. None of you watch it, okay? We've got games. We've got games on Friday night. You got BC, Louisville, you got UNLV and Boise, and then you got Rutgers and USC. I don't want to hear from any of you that you're watching the World Series. Keep those comments coming in, by the way, on the Varsity Network channel. We love going through those. I know Phil really enjoys them as well.
I know who made it. It's the Yankees and the Dodgers.
That's right. It's actually a stacked card in terms of, the history of those organizations. But we don't care, Trev.
Not stacked enough.
We're not talking baseball on this show.
Enough.
No baseball.
Come on, Trev.
All right. How about undefeated BYU? Barely, though, right? 7-0 are the Cougars, 6-1 against the spread. Heading to the bounce house Saturday, 3:30 kick at UCF. And BYU's a dog this week. They're getting 2.5 to 3 points, depending on where you look, on the road. BYU, they were giving up big play after big play on the ground against Oklahoma State last week. So if that's becoming a problem, UCF is not the team you want to run into. The Knights, the average of 280 on the ground per game. They had a really good Iowa State team on the ropes in Ames last week as well. I've been waiting for the rug to get pulled out from under BYU. I don't know if this is the week or not, but it's costing me too much money to keep trying to find out. What do you like here, Phil?
Yeah, that's the thing with the streaks. When you play on a streak, you win many times, you lose only once. And when you play against a streak, you can lose many times and you win only once. So, but they did not cover last week against Oklahoma State. And the thing here is UCF is a lot better than its 3-4 record. Losing to Colorado, Florida, Cincinnati, Iowa State, and running the football for 354 yards and 9.1 yards per carry against Iowa State's defense. That's impressive. Now, they did get 2 interception returns for touchdowns. Yeah, one got dropped at the 1-yard line. They scored the next play. Basically, 2 interception returns for touchdowns to give them the lead in that game. Iowa State needed a late comeback to beat them, but they're showing me that they're a tough team. It's home. It's Bright House. You've got that run game against the BYU defense, as you mentioned, just gave up 7.3 yards per carry to Oklahoma State. I think the situation does favor UCF, and frankly, I think the move to Ja'Cory Brown at quarterback has been a spark. KJ Jefferson was banged up last year. Never really looked like KJ Jefferson from 2 years ago this year. Looked a little slow, and now Ja'Cory Brown gives him a little dynamicism at the quarterback position. I like UCF at home in this one.
Before we get to the evening slate, I'm going to give you a twofer in the Big Ten. Northwestern visiting Iowa. Hawkeyes are 14-point favorites. They're seeking their 12th win in their last 15 homecomings. Mr. Caleb Johnson to go over 1,000 yards rushing last week. Cats have won 3 of 4 road games dating back to last season. They're 14-point underdogs, though. And then there's Maryland visiting Minnesota. Golden Gophers are favored by 4.5 at home. Each of those 3:30 games, Big Ten Network and FS1. Do you have a stronger lean with one versus the other, Phil? Iowa covering the 14 or Maryland catching 4.5 on the road?
Yeah, I'm going to take Maryland in this one. When I look at the game last week, Maryland was basically on death row. They were done. They were cooked. They were a 3-4 team. They were going down to USC. They blocked that field goal, come back and win. Now all of a sudden you're 4-3, and the team's got to be enthused and up for this one. And you look at Minnesota's last 2 games. They also were down against USC, came back and won, and then UCLA. They were down, beaten. In fact, UCLA had a 329, 234-yard edge, but now they're off a bye. So I think Maryland, prior to the year, I thought Maryland was the better team, and I think Maryland probably still is a better team. If you're getting 4, this game's a toss-up game. I think it's going to be decided by a field goal. So take the points with Maryland in a possible upset.
Phil's Magazine does note the home team 4-0 straight up and ATS in the last 4 games, upsets in 3 of the last 6. So going against that streak here, though, taking the road favorite in Maryland at Minnesota. That's at least where Phil is leaning. Let's jump to the evening. 8th-ranked LSU at number 14, Texas A&M, 7:30 on ABC. It appears the inside track to Atlanta is on the line here, Phil, as the remaining 2 SEC undefeateds clash in College Station. Each 6-1, each winners of 6 in a row after dropping the season openers, LSU to USC in Vegas, A&M at home to Notre Dame. First meeting as top 15 team since 1987. LSU has won all 3 SEC meetings when both have been ranked. Aggies 4-0 in the SEC for the first time since 2016, and LSU their best start since that national championship winning year in 2019. They've lost 5 of 6, though, at ranked foes.
Yeah, and here we'll just take a quick look at the screen, and then we'll bounce back. But this shows you the series history between these two. And if you take a look at here at the home team, you can see that the home team has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in a row. Now, what do the colors mean? If it says win, that means that the home team won the game straight up. The colors mean red means they didn't cover these 2, and the blue means it was a push. But the spread's only 2.5. So basically win the game straight up, and you're in good shape here. And then you take a look at Texas A&M, spread record-wise. Take a look at them home straight up. Look at these 6-1, 11, 15, 21, 25, 32, and 8 straight up at home. They're 3-1 this year, so 35-9 straight up at home. And then with LSU, I don't have anything to show you. You can flip the screen back, Kyle. But with LSU, when they go on the road under Brian Kelly, or away from home, I should say, they're just 6-15 against the spread. So you have a poor road team versus a very strong home team. College Station, one of the toughest venues in the country. I will say this. I had Arkansas last week, and LSU beat me down. And I was like, whoa, watch out for this LSU team. That was the best game they played all year by far, because the previous week against Mississippi, they didn't. And if they're surging, they could be a very dangerous team. But the home away thing, I've got a lot of stats on on philsteele.com. Which show you that Texas A&M, I mean, they've got a really good defense. They've got the defensive edge, their home edge. Mike Elko is one of the best head coaches out there as far as being a home underdog. So, and the situation also favors A&M. LSU's off that Mississippi game, off a road win against Arkansas, and now playing on the road again in another tough game. That's 3 tough games in 3 weeks.
Third-ranked Penn State might have their hands full this weekend. 7:30 kick in Camp Randall against a pretty good Wisconsin team here of late. Badgers won by 20 last week at Northwestern. Very impressive at Rutgers the week before that. Penn State's been a very good team. They rank inside the top 10 offensively, 6 in yards given up defensively. Nittany Lions have also really had the edge in this series here. 7-2 straight up, 7-2 against the spread versus the Badgers. The last I've seen, I think Penn State's favored by 6.5 on the road here. What do you like, Phil?
Yeah, the number's a little pricey. You guys know from the show that I talked about Wisconsin playing Alabama even in the first half, but they were down 21-3 with that late touchdown. They led USC at the half 21-10. They ended up losing both those games. But then since then, they've been absolutely dominant, just beating down Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern. Their defense has allowed 16 points, basically 5 points per game the last 3 weeks. Love the way that Tyree Walker, the Oklahoma transfer, is running the football, 565 yards. Braden Locke looks better and better each week, and their defense has been playing nasty. The last 3 weeks they've only allowed 291 yards per game, and that includes last 4 weeks, including USC. Penn State, I think, is the better team. Should be able to go on the road and get the win, but they barely got past USC. I thought the line would be about 3, so 6.5. I think you're getting a value here with Wisconsin. I'll take Penn State to win the game by 3. But I'm going to continue to ride the Badgers on the spread.
And with Liberty falling on Wednesday, Penn State now the only team in consecutive seasons to begin 6-0. West Virginia is going to Arizona, 6 o'clock on FS1. Neil Brown had said after the Iowa State loss and then before the bludgeoning that Kansas State had put on him, hey, look, still come to our games. The weather is great and tailgating is fun. Well, the weather will remain perfect. They're on the road now. They're in the desert. And I'm not sure any Mountaineers fan will tell you those were inspiring words from their head coach, who seemed to have saved his job a year ago, and now his seat is very warm again. What do you make of this matchup in the desert? Again, 6 o'clock on FS1, Arizona at home against West Virginia.
Yeah, and last week's game against Kansas State, taking it a little bit deeper, in the first half, West Virginia had a 12-5 first down edge. They had a 230 to 152 yard edge, 2 key plays. Kansas State got an interception return for a touchdown. That's a 14-point swing. And the other one was West Virginia went for it on it wasn't even 4th and goal. It was the last play of the half at the goal 3-yard line, and they got stopped. And so what happened was they didn't score that 7, gave up a free 7, could easily have been winning the thing at half. Then in the second half, they were without their quarterback, Garrett Green. They were without their top running back, Jaheim White. They were without their top offensive lineman, Milam. And it sort of snowballed on them. Now, Nico Miracle is a guy that was a VHT. Last year, he led them to a win over Texas Tech at home, a very comfortable win. They led 13-3 at the half. And Miracle's actually from Arizona. So he's going back to Arizona. I'm thrilled to be here. So if Garrett Green doesn't play, I like Miracle. He's, like I said, a VHT. They've got the running backs. I do think Jaheim White will play, but they also have Donaldson back there. I think the offensive line can get better. And then when you look at Arizona, they haven't impressed me really in any game this year. The Utah game was by far their best game, but that's a game Utah had 3 long drives, got stopped on downs twice, and settled for a field goal on the third. But other than that, they have not been impressive. And they're banged up as well. They lost 2 key defensive starters for the year. They lost a left tackle who's out for the game. So I think you got 2 banged up teams, but West Virginia is the better team. And I think West Virginia wins this one on the road. Plus my last 4 weeks AGG on the game. If you go to take the Phil Steele Plus tour, it is my last 4 weeks AGG play of the week. West Virginia, the last 4 weeks playing to 111.1 level, and Arizona just 102. That's a 9-point difference, and West Virginia's getting points here.
Arizona favored by 3.5 points. First meeting ever between those two teams.
FSU has a 7 o'clock kick at number 6 Miami Saturday night. This was the game for me growing up. Big part of the reason why I pulled so hard for the Noles all these years. Some of the best memories, some of the worst memories come from this series. Don't think this is going to be a very good trip for Florida State this year. Lost at Duke last week on Friday night. They have been unthinkably bad on offense this year. 132nd in FBS and yards per game. As a fan, I want some answers from Mike Norvell. Kyle was there, ACC Media Days. I tried to help this guy with his golf swing, and this is how he repays me. Look, if you like free money, I think this would be one of the top plays on the board. Miami's lost 3 in a row in this series. They're going to be out for blood. I think they'll cover the 21 points pretty easily, to be honest. And, I mean, they might score 54 on their own, so the over could be in play here too. What do you like, Phil?
On the end, and Kyle, go ahead and light up the screen here. This is a red-green game on the Phil Steele Plus Tour. And what I mean by that is in the magazine, I can't use green and red, which green is good numbers, red is bad numbers, because it doesn't show up as well in print. But here on Phil Steele Plus, it shows up great. And we take a look at Miami's offense, exactly what Tripp was just pointing out. Look at their offense, 577 yards per game. Now, over here, what this shows you is how many yards you get above what an opponent allows. Miami is gaining 190 yards above opponent's average. That means if you come in allowing 400 yards per game, they're going to gain 590 on you. That's phenomenal. And look at this. Florida State's allowing 370 yards per game. So if you add 190 to that, that's 560 yards. That's basically their average. Now let's go to the flip side of the coin. Florida State, look at their offense, all red, right down the line. In fact, they have in top 300 yards in a single game, 272 yards per game. They're averaging 73 yards below what opponents allow. Well, Miami's only allowing 306 yards per game. So if they get 73 below that, that's only 230 yards. So you're looking at 560 yards versus 230. Now, motivation. I'm going to take you back here. 2022. Look at this. Miami at home loses to Florida State 45-3. Can you imagine Mario Cristobal? They kicked our ass last time we were here. Let's give them some payback. I think it's a payback game for Miami after embarrassing 45-3 loss at home the last time they played Florida State. Agree with you 100%, Tripp. I like Miami of Florida in this one.
That's beautiful stuff. Phil Steele Plus, you just got a closer glimpse at that. The power rating, special teams, pass efficiency, statistical leaders, all that updated weekly, game-by-game stats, results for decades. 48 years of year-by-year results for all 134 FBS teams, $99 value. Phil Steele Plus, go to philsteele.com. You bring up Duke, who didn't crush Florida State in any sense of the imagination. 23-16 was the final, but they forced the Noles to turn the ball over on 3 consecutive plays. They only had 180 yards of total offense and were able to get their first ever win over Florida State in 23 tries. Yeah, it was a surreal scene. There were some Appalachian FSU fans who were sitting on my side, the FSU side of Wallace Wade Stadium last week. I won't repeat the obscenities that they were hurling towards Mike Norvell, but it was quite the treat. It was entertaining, to say the least. Duke's at home again, 8 o'clock, ACC Network Saturday, catching 12.5 as 22nd-ranked SMU comes to town, Phil. First ranked test for the Blue Devils this season.
Sort of reminds me a little bit of BYU last year. BYU at one point last year, let me see what their record was. BYU was 5-2 at one point, yet they were being outgained in every game. And I said they're one of the fake teams in the country. I think Duke is in that level right now. They are 6-1, but being outgained by 86 yards per game in ACC play. And this is a smooth team that opened up the season slow. And that home loss to BYU doesn't look as bad right now, but they've been really dominant once they get into ACC play. They're outgaining their ACC foes by 163 yards per game. The key has been Kevin Jennings. He lights it up on offense, got a 9-2 ratio, dangerous runner. They got Brashard Smith, the running back. They've got a bevy of receivers. And the defense playing pretty well, holding opponents to 30 yards per game below their average. I think SMU's the better team here. And this is going to be the first of, I think, a few games where I'm going to be going against Duke down the stretch, because Duke is not as good as their record yet. That 6-1 keeps the spread reasonable. I like SMU in this one.
Seeking a 9th straight road win, too, averaging 45.5 points per game during a 4-game win streak. Tripp?
Nice.
I played the streak last week with Kansas. They hadn't covered all season. Well, they were playing Houston, who I thought found something on offense a couple of weeks ago versus TCU. Nope, it was easy win for the Jayhawks. This stuff can get very frustrating at times. Jayhawks on the road at K-State this week for the Sunflower Showdown. Wildcats favored by 10. K-State's been great in this series. I think they've got a good chance to cover here. A little worried about the KU secondary. They've got some really good players there that can turn you over. Kobe Bryant, he's an NFL player. What do you like in this one, Phil?
Yeah, Kobe Bryant, 3 interceptions. And so he's on a roll. Once again, Kyle, flip to the screen real quick. Won't spend a lot of time on it. But if we take a look here, look at this green. Now, a green means that the team won the game. This is series history against Kansas, last 27 years matchups, 15 in a row. And this goes back to, there was a couple of red in here, But Bill Snyder, if you go back previous to this, it was all green. He always played their best game against Kansas. Now, spread-wise, they have not covered 4 of this bunch, but the majority of them are covers. So series-wise, Kansas State always wins this. And then if you take a look at the spread records, I believe Kansas State's a really good home favorite. Look at this, 6-1, 5-1, so 11-2 the last 2 years as a home favorite. And Kansas struggles on the road under Leipold. So you've got a strong home favorite, a strong series edge, and in my mind, the better team. Now, Kansas is better than their record. All these games were close. I believe they led all 5 of these games in the second half. But I think K-State's a better team at home. I like the Wildcats minus the points in that one.
Battle for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. Michigan State and Michigan, 3.5 is the spread here. Mason Blue, our favorite, 40 the total, 7:30 Big Ten Network. Final one of the night before we go chasing in your power plays, Phil. We'll get you out of here. Big bro, little bro matchup. They've played for the trophy since 63. Man, 49-0. The Wolverines win a year ago. Seems like ages ago. How do you set this one up in your mind, Phil?
Yeah, and where the spread is, I think helps us. Now, last week's results, if you watch Michigan lose to Illinois or Michigan State just dominate Iowa, it's really surprised me. I mean, they really controlled that game. I think they had a 17-2 first down edge at the half. But now you're taking Aiden Childs, you're putting him on the road. Aiden Childs has a 6-10 ratio this year. This is a Michigan State team that when they played at Oregon, they were down 31-0. They needed 10 garbage points to get the cover there. We're not talking about garbage points in this game. We're talking 3.5 for a team that Michigan won last year. As you mentioned, 49-0. Michigan's at home. They're desperate. And look at the teams they've lost to this year. Texas, 1 loss. Washington, pretty good team. It's always tough to win at Husky Stadium. Illinois, 1 loss this year. And they've even beaten USC. They've beaten Minnesota. So I think Michigan is the better team. The spread value is remarkable here. I like Michigan minus the 3.5 over Michigan State. And this will be the first time in years, I think, where Michigan doesn't come into this, like you said, as the big brother, the big favorite, not caring. Because this is Michigan State's most important game on the schedule. But I got a feeling this week it's Michigan's most important game.
I just wrote that one down. I have a feeling we'll come back to it. 3 games late at night. We'll chase Washington State, laying 2 touchdowns on the road at San Diego State, 10:30 CBS Sports Network. Nevada visiting Hawaii. Coin flip, basically. Rainbow Warriors favored by a point. Midnight start there. I have a feeling, though, Phil, you might have a play in Boulder. I'll let Tripp set it up with the Bearcats visiting.
I think it could be a great game. Our guy, Roddy Jones, College Sports Now, on the call in Boulder this week for Cincy and Colorado. The Buffs favored by 5.5. These are 2 good teams. Colorado's definitely improving over the last few weeks. They've got all that talent up there. But we talked about it last week. Cincinnati, look at their record. Beat a surprisingly good team in Arizona State last week. They've won at UCF, lost a shootout at Texas Tech, dominated Houston. Their only other loss, they blew a 3-score lead against Pitt. They only lost by a point there. This could be a totally different story for Cincinnati here. This could be a really good game too here, Phil.
I think it will be a great game, but I like the Bearcats. And it goes back to what Tripp talked about, and you guys, I like to play on streaks. That Texas Tech game, they outplayed Texas Tech. They had a 29-21 first down edge. They were plus 3.5. They lost by 3. They got the cover. They have covered 5 in a row. And if you just keep on that streak, which is what I'm doing here, I'm playing a streak, taking Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati's still an under-the-radar team. I like Brendan Sorsby at QB. Kiner and Pryor at running back are dynamic, and they're completely under the radar. Now, Colorado has impressed me. Ever since they got that Hail Mary, they've been a different team. They even gave Kansas State a great game at home. But I'm riding the streak of Cincinnati. And I tell you what, if they win this week, I'll be picking them again next week. So I'm going to take Cincinnati to get their 6th straight cover. And we're getting over a field goal here. I think it probably ends up being a field goal game. Wouldn't surprise me if Cincinnati won it.
Speaking of 3, you went 3-0 last week with your power plays. Georgia Southern, Illinois, and Temple all covering. And one of your 3, the first of your 3 is the game we just talked about, right, Phil?
That's right. I'm going to use Cincinnati plus the 5.5. Another game we just talked about as well, Michigan minus the 3.5. And then last week, I said on the Temple-Tulsa game, go take the Phil Steele plus tour. I'll give you complete reasoning on that. Temple gave you a nice, easy win. Go take the Phil Steele plus tour and find out why I like San Jose State plus the points over Fresno in an upset. Complete results right there at Phil Steele plus tour.
Yeah, go to Twitter, go to X at PhilSteele042. You'll see Phil has tweeted that out. The weekly YouTube Phil Steele Plus tour is there. Of course, you catch our show as well to be up in a matter of moments. My 3 power plays. I'm taking Michigan as well. I didn't need much talking into, but 3.5-point favorite at home. Desperate, like you said. Michigan State's been playing above their skis. No disrespect to Jonathan Smith, but it is only year 1. And let's not forget, they are the reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines. I think they're going to lay the hammer down at home under the lights at the Big House. Also, you talked me into Notre Dame. I was skeptical coming into it, but I think Notre Dame's going to be ready. They're going to give Navy their best shot. They're not going to undermine what the midshipmen are, nor do they ever. They respect the service academies, but this is a really good Navy team, and I think Notre Dame is going to be up for the challenge to cover the 13 at MetLife at ECU. I like it. They'll play inspired off the coaching change. Give me them to cover the touchdown against Temple. Tripp, what about you?
All right. We're going to do better this week.
Miami's going to do better this week.
easiest play on the board. Can't do any worse, right? Well, I guess I technically could. Miami, they'll cover a big number. No problem at all there. Louisville, BC, I'm going over 53.5. And just to go a little opposite here, I'll take Ole Miss to cover the big spread against Oklahoma.
What is that spread? Let me get
20.
your number. Where are you shopping?
Seeing 20.
Okay. Ole Miss 20, Oklahoma. All right. I got it. That's a show, boys. I love it. Week 9, Phil Steele Show is in the books. Appreciate you for being so pleasant with us, Phil, especially as we go over a few minutes. Look forward to talking to you next week. Hey, the Blitz. I'll be hosting 6 to midnight. Stephen Hartzell, 12 to 6. That's Saturday. Sirius XM as well as the Varsity Network app. Make sure you download that. Tripp and myself, we got a big game against Commanders. Too bad Jaden Daniels may not be playing. I want strength on strength against Caleb. The previous 2 Heisman winners, the number 1 and number 2 overall pick, we're not going to get it, but we are flexed. At least it doesn't appear we're going to get it. We are flexed CBS 425 on Sunday. Can't wait to talk about that with Tripp Monday when we get back in the office and all of these picks. Phil, you've been a trooper as usual, man. Herculean effort. We love you.
Hey, a lot of fun as always. Look forward to listening to you on the Blitz this week.